Let's call to order the City Commission meeting of the City of St. Pete Beach. Today is Tuesday, March 26th, 2024. It is 6 p.m. If you'll please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. City Clerk, if you'll please do the roll call.
Vice Mayor Lorenzen.
Here.
Commissioner Marriott.
Here.
Commissioner Phillips.
Here.
Commissioner Resnicki.
Here.
Mayor Petrilla.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. City Clerk.
We are going to this evening swear in our two new commissioners that were elected. And the first one will be Karen Marriott for District 1.
Sure.
And raise your right hand and put your hand on the Bible. I, Karen Marriott,
I, Karen Marriott,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I am a full-time resident
that I am a full-time resident
of the City of St. Pete Beach,
of the City of St. Pete Beach,
that I will support,
protect, and defend
the Constitution and government
the Constitution and government
of the United States
of the United States
and of the state of Florida,
and of the state of Florida,
that I am duly qualified
to
hold office
hold office
under the Constitution
under the Constitution
of the state, and that I will well and faithfully perform the duties of Commissioner on which I am about to enter. So help me God.
So help me God.
Thank you. And next will be Commissioner Betty Resnicki for District 3. Right here. I, Betty Resnicki,
I, Betty Resnicki, wasn't my name.
do solemnly swear
Do solemnly swear
that I am a full-time resident
that I'm a full-time resident
of the City of St. Pete Beach,
of the City of St. Pete Beach,
that I will support, protect, and defend the Constitution
the Constitution
and the government of the United States
and the government of the United States
and of the state of Florida.
and of the state of Florida,
That I am duly qualified to hold office under the Constitution of the state, and that I will well and faithfully perform the duties of Commissioner on which I am about to enter. So help me God. Thank you.
I think you're up again.
Sorry?
I said I think you're up again with the proclamation.
Okay. Jennifer, did you want to speak to the proclamation? Yeah, here comes Jennifer McMahon.
Thank you.
Hopefully you're aware, because there's a big sign right on one of the pillars as you walk into City Hall off of Corey Avenue, that we are a tree city. And what that entails is we have to do a few things in the year to keep up that status. And one of those is to have a proclamation every year declaring a certain day as Arbor Day. So, Mayor, I don't know if you want to read it, if you want me to read it.
Please.
Okay.
Do the honors.
Whereas in 1872, the Nebraska Board of Agriculture established a special day to be set aside for the planting of trees, and whereas this holiday called Arbor Day was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska, and whereas Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and the world, and whereas trees can be a solution to combating climate change by reducing the erosion of our precious topsoil by wind and water, cutting heating and cooling costs, moderating the temperature, cleaning the air, producing life-given oxygen, and providing habitat for wildlife. And whereas trees are a renewable resource, giving us paper, wood for our homes, fuel for our fires, and countless other wood products. And whereas trees in our city increase property values, enhance the economic vitality of business areas, and beautify our community. And whereas trees, wherever they are planted, are a source of joy and spiritual renewal. Now, therefore,
I, Adrian Petrilla,
Mayor of the City of St. Pete Beach, do hereby proclaim the last day of April as Arbor Day in the City of St. Pete Beach, and I urge all citizens to celebrate Arbor Day and support the efforts to protect trees, woodlands. And further, I urge all citizens to plant trees to gladden the heart and promote the well-being of the future generations. And to do that, if you don't have the money, well, guess what? We are giving away trees this Saturday in Haran Park, and some seeds if you don't have a lot of space and you want to do some plants as part of our spring event in Haran Park. So we have the underwater egg hunt. Our Easter Bunny will be there. It's from 10 to noon, and our Parks Department will be out there. There will be a touch of truck, but we will be giving away trees and plants and seeds at the event. So help support the cause and our Tree City, and come by and get a free tree or plant or seed. So thank you.
thank you. Do we have any amendments to the agenda as proposed?
I wanted to add an item for discussion,
Okay. Which is?
which is, I wanted to add, to discuss about Form 6 lawsuit that, I'm not sure if you all read it, but just wanted to bring it up for discussion item.
Anyone else? We have a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
I'll move to approve the agenda as amended.
I'll second.
City Clerk, if you'll please do a roll call.
Commissioner Philps,
Yes.
Commissioner Reznicki,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Lorenzen,
Yes.
Commissioner Marriott,
Yes.
Mayor Petrella.
Yes.
Motion carries.
City Clerk, do we have any audience comments?
We do. Brad Pettit.
If you'll please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening, everybody. It was nice to walk down in nice weather. It was about the longest winter I spent in St. Pete Beach since I've
If you'll
moved
please
here.
state your name and address for the record, so that we,
My name is Brad Pettit. I live at 8151 Blind Pass Road in St. Pete Beach.
thank you, sir.
And I did enjoy my walk. I just came up here. I wanted to show a little gratitude. Took a lot of intestinal fortitude for you all to step up as appointees when that arose. Took a little bit more intestinal fortitude to run for office unopposed. I got to take my hat off to you. It's a difficult job. I've lived in St. Pete Beach for, do math because I'm in dimension old, just about 20 years now. We've all who've lived locally over a period of time have seen the culture of the community change, not only in the beaches but in the cities. Where I used to live, I used to really enjoy Clearwater Beach because Clearwater Beach was a residential Florida beach town with a tourist base. Absolutely, I understand that. You couldn't pay me to go there now. Couldn't do it. The conditional permit use getting passed for Serrata did cause me concern. My concern is it's going to continue. It's going to go to the trade winds. It's going to go to Beth Moran's property, and it's going to disappear here. So I talked to my wife the other night about her age, and I'm like, what are we going to do? I'm a transplant. She's a straight up Florida cracker, which is not a derogatory statement for anybody who knows Florida. She's a true Floridian. And I told her panhandle because that's what we like about it. But again, gratitude. May not agree with everything. Will never be hostile. Love my neighbors. Love the people who live here. Wow, I did that quick. But again, just gratitude. Thank you for what you do. I know it's not an easy job. I especially know it's not an easy job when you got to sit here till 2:30 in the morning. So I guess my visor off to you, and season openings in 2 days. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
That was the only general comment.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is 4A, the consent agenda, 4A and B. Do we have a motion?
I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
Do we have a second?
Second.
City Clerk, if you'll please do the roll call.
Commissioner Resnicki?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Lorenzen?
Yes.
Commissioner Marriott?
Yes.
Commissioner Phillips?
Yes.
Mayor Petrella?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next, we have action item 5A, election of a vice mayor. We'll entertain motions, suggestions, recommendations, nominations. Not everyone at once. Like, I can't do it, so one of y'all is going to have to do
You
it.
can recommend.
Do we have to make a change?
We don't have to make a change. We will be making a change whether we do it now or in 2 or 3 months' time, so you can nominate that it stays the same, for example, so that's an option.
Rich, are you willing to stay vice mayor?
Yes.
Okay. I would make a motion just to keep it as is for now then.
I'll second.
City Clerk, if you'll please do a roll call.
Vice Mayor Lorenzen?
No, I'm just kidding, yes.
Commissioner Marriott?
Yes.
Commissioner Phillips?
Yes.
Commissioner Resnicki?
Yes.
Mayor Petrella?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, next we have item 5B, appointments or reappointments to the City of St. Pete Beach Advisory Boards and Committees. We do not have to take any action, but if you do want to take action, we can.
I don't have any action to take at this point. I've reached out to most of my appointees and have heard back from a few, and I'm waiting to hear back from a few. So I don't, for me, I don't have any action to take at this time.
District 4 is good as well.
I will be changing one of mine, and I think the application is complete. Should I mention the name now or wait until the trainings are complete? I'm not sure, because that,
I mean, have they qualified? I mean, have they filled out the information, the application, and everything like that?
I believe so, everything's complete.
Okay. Shouldn't be a problem.
To announce?
Yeah.
Okay, so for, just for the Board of Adjustment, and I hope I say your last name right, I know I said Garshow, right? And she's here actually too, so Kathy will be appointed for, in April, for the Board of Adjustment.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further items of discussion on 4B? Public comments? Okay, thank you. Next, we have item 5C, the Lazarillo Park replacement lights. Jennifer, welcome back.
Good evening, Jennifer McMahon, Chief Operating Officer. Before you is a replacement of the light system that are in Lazarillo tennis courts. Probably Betty can attest, we have so many electrical problems in that particular park where the lights don't come on, the lights stay on too long. It's an old-timey system that you hand crank, and this replacement, in particular for the galvanized pole, is a one system that is a warranted for 25 years, whereas opposed to the other ones keeping the concrete poles that are existing is a 10-year warranty. So our recommendation is to do the 25, particularly because of the location of where it's at and some of the issues that we have with flooding. And so this would upgrade that. And what comes with this, we did this in Hurley Park, is it is controlled by an app. So by a computer or a phone, we can control the time. So if it's raining, we can turn it off. When it's on too long, we get a call and we can turn it off from wherever we're at. So that is a very similar system that we have in Hurley Park. It is the same system. And the other, what I like about this lighting system as well is they're very cognizant of the lighting concerns we have. That park is surrounded by homes, and so is Hurley Park, as well as turtle lighting. So they have a system where they design how they are faced and the angles they're at, so there is no light shining in any of the neighbors' homes, and there isn't anything, not particular from that park, that would do anything to harm any of the wildlife. So that is what is before you today.
I do have some questions
Yes.
on that one. Now that you said wildlife, just because I wasn't even
ospreys.
thinking of that. Yes, the ospreys. So do they have to be moved? Does someone come to move those ospreys that are off?
We can only do them during a certain time of year. So if they're laying the eggs, we can't do it, and we have to wait till the fledglings leave before we can do anything on the light poles.
Okay.
Yeah, because we've had to deal with that, and we've had to go on to DEP on it because there's droppings throughout different times. So we were trying to address it and try to move it, but it's not something we can do until they leave the nest.
Has it ever been considered to do, and it's just, I didn't even think about it until you're saying this, but because there are so many ospreys there between the trees and the trees that have died and some that had to be removed, to have a structure for them so that they don't get on the next light fixture and do the droppings like you're saying?
Yes, we did also have a design for that about a year or two ago when we were looking at doing that. So I think it would be a good time for us to do that at the same time without harming any of the nesting. But yeah, it's like a wooden structure with like a little
Correct. Yeah, I've seen-
cage. So it's not a large expense, but it's definitely something we looked into.
And that's something that we can bring later on, you think? Or is the city, I don't know the cost of something like that to do.
I'll find the
it's
cost, but
something
I
we
don't
can
think
bring
it would be something that would be
Okay, significant.
over the 25, yeah.
Okay. Then the other thing was for hours of operation on lights, because when I was president of the DONSSR, and I know, Jennifer, we've talked many times about this in different meetings, is how late those, because there was that timer system, so you could turn it and nobody could literally be on the tennis court, but because it's just ticking away, like, the old style microwaves, to turn off. What are the hours of all our parks with tennis courts or baseball fields? Is there specific hours? Who has the authority to turn them on and off? Is it just anyone who shows up, just, like we've always had that issue of just turning them on?
10 o'clock, we have the ability to set the time. Where we get into an issue, it happens every time we change our spring forward and go backwards. We tend to always get a call because we always forget to go back and change the time off or the time on based on whatever time of year. But with this system, it is more controlled and it's not as manual it is today.
So are all our parks manually controlled by anybody who goes to the park?
Not by the time where it turns off or can get turned on. We control that in a separate location that the public doesn't have access to. So our facilities guys can go in and change the back end of it, I guess you can say, but turning them on and off during those times are done manually by the public.
Okay, so so the light won't stay on until 10 o'clock the whole time?
Unless
right?
someone uses it.
Unless someone uses it. And so it's not so is there a timer? So like, will it time off? Or does someone manually go there? Like how? So if not, the same thing will keep happening, that the timer hasn't gone off, but there's nobody on. I mean, we have people who go on the tennis court and just walk through the tennis court and turn it on. They're not playing.
Yeah.
So it could take an hour. I don't know what the length of time is.
With this system, it's immediate. With the old system, it's like a 20-minute crank up to get them to turn on and then to turn off. I don't know if anybody is familiar with using those, but that's what's on there today.
Right, so this is a switch off and on?
This
Or
is
motion detected, or is there a feature like that that's going to turn it off?
Good question. I don't know that we've got it where it's motion censored, but I play on tennis courts that are motion censored for them to turn on.
No, it would help, because I know, I would hate to tell a resident, well, you can just, walk across the street and then go turn off the light, if maybe there's a better way of doing it.
Yeah.
Because that was an issue. And so therefore, you said till 10 o'clock, so that means anybody who goes onto any park can't turn them on after 10?
Correct.
Okay.
And we'll look at doing an electrical box on the outside.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, that would help, because we know that there was boxes there before, but they had no outlets, and, now since we've been doing some events over there, that would be
That's
nice.
easy to do with this, yep.
Okay.
So Jennifer, basically, it's the two proposals are whether it's a 10-year warranty or a 25-year warranty, and it's a $20,000 price difference, right?
Yep, one is galvanized poles,
Yep,
and the other one is keeping the existing concrete poles.
okay.
And the galvanized comes as one system as rather than piecemealing it. So our recommendation for maintenance purpose alone, just the savings over a 15-year time is worth, I believe, a 25-year warranty.
Okay.
How long have they been in business?
Musco? Long time. Do you know?
I remember using them in the mid-'80s,
Yeah.
so they've been around a long time.
It's just, I think it's important to know whether the 25-year warranty is worth something or not.
We've used them before, and a reputable company that I would feel comfortable with, for sure.
I understand, it's more comforting to hear they've been around since the 80s as opposed to if they showed up 2 years ago.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
They're well-known.
Yeah, they are very well known. Just one interesting fact about them that they like to say is when the Daytona Speedway was lit for the first time, this is who did that.
Any further questions for Jennifer?
Musco's been around since 1976. Just looked it up. Yeah, I know, because I've played tennis at those parks, and I think I might have been the one who called in the fall because,
Yeah.
yeah.
It happens like every time the time changes, and it's
Yeah.
always like,
But is the new system going to help prevent that in any way?
the new system is, yes, way better.
Okay.
It's Lazarillo that we always get the phone call for. We've redone Hurley Park. We don't have any issues. And hopefully soon with stuff that we would do with Egan, we'll get those online. And then we replaced Venus with LED, but we didn't do it through a Musco system.
Okay. Yeah, and I know there is one active osprey nest. I don't know if
Yes,
there's
I was
eggs,
just
but
there
right in
today.
the center, yeah. So I think that's a good idea about potentially, if a structure is fairly reasonable cost to put outside of the courts, I think that's a cool idea.
There could be some funding with some of the organizations that we worked with that designed it too.
Sure.
Okay.
And for the motion, if that's available, can it be added? I don't know, like the whole, like if that's something.
I'll
we
find out.
wanted.
I'll
Okay.
call Bob.
City Clerk, do we have any audience comments?
Not on this item.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
I'll move to approve the proposal with Musco Lighting in the amount of $202,475 for the LED tennis and lighting in Lazarillo Park.
I'll second.
City Clerk, if you'll please do a roll call.
Commissioner Marriott?
Yes.
Commissioner Filtz?
Yes.
Commissioner Rosnicki?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Lorenzen?
Yes.
Mayor Petrilla?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next, we have item 6, resolutions. A quasi-judicial hearing resolution 2023-24, conditional use permit 23069 and variance 23068 for 5090 Gulf Boulevard. City Attorney?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. As you know, quasi-judicial is going to require you all to disclose any ex parte communication research that you may have done on this matter. Then when it comes time to start the process, you want to have the clerk swear in anyone who's going to speak and testify here today. I will also indicate that there are two, you're going to have to vote separately, one on the CUP and then secondly on the variance. Those are two different items, but the code reads that if a variance is a companion to a CUP, it is heard by the commission. Typically, your variances go to your Board of Adjustments, but when they're accompanying a CUP, they come to you. But still, they're two separate votes, but you'll hear one presentation. Okay?
Thank you. Disclosures and swearing in. District 4.
I've had 0 on this one.
Go ahead.
Lots of emails from people who live in the area or no longer living in the area, from the condominium on the far end on the street by the beach, and just personally myself driving to the area and monitoring it, throughout the week and on weekends.
Thank you.
I've been by the property, driving by, reviewed emails, and talked with city staff on it and reviewed the packet.
Thank you.
I've had emails from a handful of residents and spoke to a couple of nearby residents on the phone as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to stand corrected. I was thinking more along the line of lobbyist stuff. So yes, I read all the emails. I've also looked at the lot several times.
Thank you. I've met with the applicant on a number of occasions. They are the parents of one of my neighbors. I've reviewed the package, read the emails, spoke with staff, did a site visit. Thank you. City Clerk, if you'll please swear in.
Would you like me to read the resolution?
Please.
Resolution 2023-24, a resolution of the City Commission of the City of St. Pete Beach, Florida, approving a conditional use permit pursuant to Section 35.3B3 of the Land Development Code to allow the permanent establishment of a semi-pervious commercial parking lot at parcel number 063216081180000470 with the address of 5090 Gulf Boulevard, incorporating the conditions outlined herein and providing for correction of Scrivener's error and an effective date.
Thank you.
If you are going to be addressing the commission, please stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the information or factual presentation that you will give to the commission is truthful? Thank you.
Thank you. Brandon?
Good evening. Can we get that PowerPoint? Thank you. I'm Brandon Berry. I'm a city planner, senior planner, and a certified planner. This is conditional use permit case number 23069, associated with resolution 2023-24, and also variance case number 23068, which is traveling under the conditional use permit. The address is 5090 Gulf Boulevard. The owner and applicant is Haddock LLC. Agent who is present is Timothy Driscoll, Esquire of Driscoll Law Firm. The applicant requests a conditional use permit to permit the permanent establishment of a semi-pervious commercial parking lot. This request is made pursuant to Land Development Code Section 35.3B3. They're also requesting variances from Land Development Code Section 39.10 to allow for the lot to be utilized without requiring frontage sidewalk improvements and pedestrian amenities. Here's the timeline of the application. It was submitted and amended in August. The technical review committee was in September. In November, the applicant responded to the technical review committee comments. There was initially a noticing in November. We did renotice this month as well. There were two continuations of this case. The first case was in December. It was continued to January. When it was continued again, we did notice throughout the month of March. I have received 6 letters that were published with the packet. I also received 1 letter after the packet was published, which was sent to the commissioners, and I'll make part of the record. And of course, tonight is the public hearing for the case. So as always, what is a conditional use permit? Based on the definition in Division 2, it is a use that has operational, physical, and other characteristics that may be different from those of the predominant permitted uses in a zoning district, but which is a use that complements or may otherwise be compatible with the intended overall development within a district, provided that specified standards are met. The purpose and intent out of Division 4 is that certain uses are conditional rather than uses by right. They are subject to the conditional use regulations because they may, but do not necessarily, have significant adverse effects on the environment, public services, the desired character of an area, or they may create nuisances. A review of these uses is necessary due to the impact they may have on the surrounding area or neighborhood. The conditional use review provides an opportunity to allow the use when there are minimal impacts, to allow the use but impose mitigation measures to address identified concerns, or to deny the use if the concerns cannot be resolved. Here's a listing of exhibits. Here's an aerial map of the property. It is located at the southwest corner of Gulf Boulevard and 51st Avenue. The property has a zoning of LR, Large Resort District. That is also the future land use. Commercial parking lots are an allowable conditional use as a primary use in this zoning district. Here's a survey of the property. The property currently contains a 3-unit home that was constructed in 1940. Here is the site plan for this request. This is the second time this request is coming to the City Commission. It was previously heard as a conditional use permit in 2018. It was approved with conditions at the time for a 3-year period. Outside of that, the applicant has also received 5 temporary approvals since 2015. There was one in 2015, one in 2017, one in 2022, and one in 2023. I'm sorry, that's four temporary use permits. So this is the 6th time that this request is being reviewed. This is the identical site plan to the use that was approved by the City Commission in 2018. There are 28 parking spaces on the lot. 8 of them abut the residence directly to the south and to the west. There are also 20 spaces along the perimeter of the lot. You can see, it's hard to see on the survey from here, but in the southwest corner, there is a fenced area that contains a portable toilet that has been maintained while the use was in effect since at least 2018. The applicant is not requesting any adjustments to what was approved in 2018. This is the site plan that they've requested under this scope. Here are some existing photos of the site. These were taken about a month back. You can see in the top left and top right photos, these are the 4 spaces that the applicant maintains for the residential use in the property. They're located to the west side of the building. You can see the portable toilet there in the center. This was taken while the use was still operating. The bottom left photo, you can see the shell in the lot. I believe this was taken after the applicant had placed a new shell. There are some spotty areas on the site. There's a condition that we requested the applicant fill in and make consistent the surface on the site, which you can see in the bottom left and to an extent in the bottom right photos. Again, you can see the enclosure in the top left. That's the area at the southwest side of the site that contains the portable toilet and some other surface areas of the site. Staff finds that the applicant has met the burden of approval for the conditional use permit, but finds that amended conditions pertaining to distancing between the uses, the commercial and the residential uses that are on the lot surfacing and buffer improvements should be considered for any long-term issuance of this use certificate. During previous publications of this report, staff had recommended denial of the sidewalk. We did speak with the FDOT a few weeks back. There are some significant issues that they face at the front of this site that had been recognized in the original staff report, but they were mostly financial, and typically financial concerns alone are not the basis for recommendation for approval of a variance. The concerns that were shared related to improvements related to the retaining wall located at the front of the site that staff was recommending that the sidewalk be extended to, and also issues related to easements that might need to be established on the applicant's property should the easement be provided to the FDOT. On the basis of that, staff is recommending a variance that tracks with the approval condition for the conditional use permit case, which would limit it to 5 years, which is what we are also recommending for the approval of the parking lot itself. It be limited to a 5-year approval. Part of the basis of that is to keep it consistent with other parking lots in the area. There are other lots that have been approved for a 5-year period. We would like to keep it consistent with the other ones in the vicinity. Staff does recommend denial of the portion of variance case number 23068 that pertains to the pedestrian frontage improvements. There are very limited improvements that would need to be made along the Gulf Boulevard frontage of the site. These include limited landscaping, one pedestrian amenity, and they're fairly limited in scope, and I don't find that they would pose a hardship to the applicant if required. Staff recommends approval of conditional use permit number 23069 with 20 conditions. Staff recommends approval of variance number 23068 as it pertains to the sidewalk improvements, and denial of the variance as it pertains to the pedestrian frontage improvements. I just briefly wanted to go through the conditions. As I mentioned before, a commercial parking lot is a primary use of the lot, so is a multifamily development. We would like to make it clear that any approval for the use of this lot is a primary use. Should there be any kind of future redevelopment of this lot, it would require for the parking lot to be discontinued. That's condition number 1. Previously, it had been 4 spaces that staff had recommended be retained for residents of the residents that are currently existing on the site. We are recommending that the 8 spaces that abut the residents not be used for commercial parking. Commercial parking would be allowed in the 20 spaces that line the perimeter of the lot. We're recommending hours of operation be sunrise to 30 minutes after sunset. The applicant shall maintain and clean the beach access west of the property each day. The lot shall be used for standard passenger vehicles only. There shall not be any storage of boats, RVs, or so on. The lot shall be closed to all non-tenant guest or owner vehicles after sunset, except in cases of emergency. A lot attendant shall be present at all times the lot is operating. There shall be no additional lighting that is installed to operate the use. Signage shall be maintained to indicate when the lot is opened or closed and removed when not operating. There shall be a maximum of 2 signs. And 2 trash receptacles must be provided on site and maintained by the applicant. I wanted to propose a potential edit to what is in your staff report in the resolution for condition number 11. It's the same intent. The original intent was that the approval of the use and the companion sidewalk variances be limited to 5 years. I just did want to propose a condition that provides a little bit more justification to that. The applicant shall reapply 5 years from date of the development order due to potential impacts to abutting residences, surrounding area changes, and development requirements for the 10-foot sidewalk. Such application shall be made no later than 180 days prior to the 5-year mark. That's just to provide more clarification, and that the limitation would be for the 5 years that's recommended by staff. Condition 12, the applicant shall supply pedestrian easement if the city or FDOT chooses to expand the Gulf Boulevard sidewalk within the subsequent 5 years. Condition 13, the variance for the sidewalk shall expire upon redevelopment or discontinuation of the use. Should the applicant choose to redevelop the lot themselves, or should someone purchase and redevelop the lot, they would still be responsible for the 10-foot sidewalk. The surface improvement shall be made to provide distinct and reasonably complete coverage of shell, drought-tolerant sod, or other approved material where required. This would apply for the whole lot outside of the buffers. Buffer improvement shall be made within 90 days of conditional use permit approval. The applicant shall construct a permanent restroom within 180 days of approval to be made available for customers. I did want to provide a note on that in just a moment. Going on to licensing and monitoring requirements, the property shall be maintained with an active BTR. An uncured code violation or multiple cured code violations related to this use shall automatically require this use to be returned to the City Commission. And then the conditions that we recommend for any conditional use permit: any violation of the conditions herein will allow the City Commission to rescind approval of this use. And the City Commission may review periodically to ensure that the conditions are being followed. As I mentioned before, this use has previously been to the City Commission. At the time, staff had recommended that the applicant construct a sidewalk to the beach along the northern side of 51st Avenue and provide a crossing from the property that would require the removal of some parking spaces that are currently in the right-of-way on the northern side of 51st Avenue. At the time, the City Commission had removed that condition. As a result of that, I did not add it. It is in your staff report if it is something that you're considering. There is a recommended condition. I also wanted to mention, in lieu of condition number 16, there is no code requirement that the applicant provide any kind of toilet facilities for guests or customers on this lot. They have maintained a portable toilet since 2018 while the use was operating. At the previous approval, the City Commission had requested that the applicant install a portable toilet when the sewer moratorium had been lifted. The use approval had expired right around the time that the sewer moratorium was lifted, so the applicant never did construct that that permanent toilet. So in lieu of condition number 16, the City Commission does not need to require a toilet at all on the site. If you would like to allow for them to continue to maintain the portable toilet, that's also an option. I did include the condition that it be made permanent due to the recommendation of the previous City Commission. Again, staff recommends a motion to approve Resolution 2023-24 and a motion to approve variance 23068 as it pertains to the sidewalk improvements and deny variance 23068 as it pertains to the pedestrian frontage improvements. As I mentioned before, we do have the agent for the application present. I believe we do also have the owners present as well. If you have any questions for me now or after they speak, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Brandon. Do we have any questions for Brandon?
I have a quick one. You were going pretty fast on the parking spaces. You mentioned 4 for residents and 8. I kind of got lost on that part.
No problem. I'll get back to the site plan. So there are 8 parking spaces that abut the residence in the top left-hand side of that survey on the screen there. And then there are 20 spaces along the perimeter of the lot. I would ask that the 8 spaces around the residence be maintained for either residents or for guests of the residence, and that the 20 around the perimeter be maintained for commercial parking.
Got it. Thank you.
What's the reasoning for restricting them? There's 3 units. Generally, you allow 1 parking spot per unit. You've got a 4th one for guest parking. Why restrict them to 8?
With this being both a commercial and a residential use, I would like to provide, especially with this being a long-term approval, just more physical buffering between the 2 uses, the commercial and the residential uses on the lot.
But it's their own property. It's not like it's the neighbor's property that we're protecting, right?
No, that's correct. It's, it was really just a recommendation to provide that physical separation of guests. There is a recommendation that there be a lot attendant on site at all times, so if, the commission finds that there can be an adequate separation with those 4 spaces retained, that's fine.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question. How do you separate primary and secondary uses? There currently is residents living.
Mm-hmm.
So does that become secondary?
Not necessarily, and it's primary uses and secondary uses, at least as they're laid out in the future land use element, typically pertain to either the purpose intent of the district or the highest and best use. Now, in this case, a commercial parking lot, even though it's not listed in the future land use element, it is considered a primary use, but there's nothing that specifically prohibits 2 primary uses on a lot. This being in the large resort district, both residential and temporary lodging are considered primary uses, but they can still be mixed on one site under certain instances. So it's more dealing with the whether they can exist separate from another use. A secondary use would require another use be present on the site in order to be approved. A primary use doesn't necessarily need to have that other primary use present to be approved.
So in this particular case, we would have 2 primary uses.
Correct. And it's the first condition is a recommendation that the parking lot remain considered a primary use, so that in the future, if there is any kind of redevelopment of the site, if they wish to reestablish a parking lot, it would need to be considered in the context of the new use on the site.
Okay.
Mayor, may I ask Brandon a quick question?
Certainly.
A couple of questions. The residential use, that's also owned by the applicant, correct?
Correct.
Are these rental units?
I believe they are long-term rental units.
Okay, so if there were any code violations in this commercial parking lot, let's say a car left overnight and the alarm goes off, what would be the tenant's recourse?
A complaint to the city, like any other.
File a code call code enforcement on
Code
it?
enforcement, the sheriff after hours.
So
Right.
call code enforcement on your landlord? Okay.
Always
And,
use the app as well.
pardon me?
You can always use the app as well.
Or the app, yes. The other question is, you're familiar with the land development regulations, correct?
Yes.
And section, Division 4 is the conditional use permit section, correct?
Correct.
And section 4.9, which is entitled Attachment of Conditions with Approval, it has a phrase in there which says specifying the duration of the permit and hours of operation as one of a list of types of things that you as a professional planner would put together in a situation where you have a commercial parking lot and a residential use, correct?
Correct. It does go on to say that there needs to be some basis for the set of that duration, just like any condition that would apply to this lot. And that was the reason for that amended Condition 11 that I read into the record earlier, just providing the basis for it, the maintenance of the special area plan and the potential mitigation of any residential concerns that might arise in the future.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
How many, I still have some questions.
Sure.
How many prior code violations, and I'm talking about residents complaining, because I know it could be, I'm listening to what our city attorney is saying, how difficult it is for someone who's renting a property to have to tell on their landlord in the risk of losing their rental or lease. Has there been issues in the past because of this?
There was a call made to code enforcement a few months ago pertaining to a situation on the residence itself. It was not substantiated. It was closed out. There were multiple calls pertaining to operation without a permit, nothing related to the actual lot itself, but operating without a permit in place. Those have been closed out. They did receive a temporary use permit after those cases were put in. We did receive a complaint 2 weeks ago that they were operating over the weekend, but we did have staff stop out this preceding weekend, and they were not operating, at least while we were there.
Okay. So from the time from 2018, from the original CUP, and then the 4 temporary uses, do we have a number of how many violations have happened?
There were 3 code enforcement complaints since 2015. All 3 of them proceeded. They were in the last 18 months. Like I mentioned, there was one that was related to substandard property maintenance. It was closed out without action. The other 2 related to operation without a permit. They were both in 2023, and the applicant did obtain a temporary use permit after those complaints, so they were brought into compliance. There aren't any open violations on the property currently.
Okay. And then a question on the shelling, because I think something that I had read before in the packet, and you showed one of the pictures where they did put some more shelling, but maybe not as complete. From what I've read in ordinances, if a property owner, homeowner, wants to shell their driveway, is that something that we allow?
Typically, no. It's allowed under very specific instances. Off-premise supplemental parking in the Gulf Boulevard redevelopment district is one of the cases where it's allowed. But typically, to meet parking requirements, it is not permitted. Under very specific circumstances, it's allowed.
Okay. And the reason I asked this is because shelling, to me, and from what I've learned, isn't pervious, it doesn't percolate eventually, right? When it gets compacted over long periods of time, which in the case, which you can tell in the picture, it's not going to percolate any more water. It's the same as having a non-pervious area. And I know from the report, it says the engineer is waiting for calculations. Is this stuff that's going to be done before it could be operational to show that, yes, it's not going to be puddling water or there's going to be drainage?
Yeah, absolutely. Any surface improvements the engineer would want to look at just to make sure that the site can hold water. That is part of the semi-permeable standards that the site retain its own water, it doesn't cause runoff into the right-of-way. So that is something that they would look at if they were to expand. I mentioned that there are alternatives. They could use drought-tolerant sod. If they wanted to use permeable pavers, those are other conditions where they may not actually be increasing the impermeability of the site. So there are alternatives. If they choose to use shell, that would be something the engineer would look at.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Brandon?
I've got a question, Brandon. Based on the size of that property being in the large resort district, if it was to redevelop, what could it redevelop to?
I believe it's, let's see, 0.38 acres is what I have on file. It's 15 units per acre, so they could develop about 5 residential units if they wanted to redevelop. They would be allowed to have up to 50 units per acre if the site could reasonably support that. I'm not sure, but that would be in terms of temporary lodging. And that would be with a conditional use permit. By right, they would be allowed up to 30 units per acre, so that would work out to be about 11 units for the property if they could accommodate it with setbacks and parking and all the other requirements.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
thank you.
And actually, I have one more question. Is there any other property in the city of St. Pete Beach that has a similar scenario where there's 2 primary uses, one being residential and one being a commercial use?
In terms of a permanent operation, I'm not aware of any. We do have one other commercial parking lot in the Gulf Boulevard redevelopment district, but it's operating under a temporary approval like the applicant has been for some time now.
Just parking, no, right?
Correct. A shopping center, for example, can be comprised of multiple primary uses where they have commercial and office, which are usually held out as different uses. But for anything where there's a residence with a parking lot or a residence with a commercial development right on that property, I'm not familiar with any. Usually they're out parceled out.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Brandon.
Thank you.
Would the applicant like to come forward? Mr. Driscoll?
Good evening. For the record, my name is Tim Driscoll. My office is at 146 2nd Street North, Suite 310 in St. Petersburg, Florida. Thank you for allowing me to come before you and present this application. This is, and I want to thank Brandon initially. He's been very easy to work with, and he's responded to all of our questions, and I appreciate his responsiveness, and you've got a gem of an employee there. And I also want to thank Mr. Dickman for taking my call last week to discuss this item. So it is a conditional use approval. This is one of the permitted conditional uses under 35.3B3, and it's a variance application from the requirements of 39.10, and we've asked for a variance from the entire section. I think Brandon laid out pretty clearly that there are 2 different elements in that section. The first, subsection A, is the 10-foot sidewalk requirement, and staff is supporting that application. In subsection B, there's a landscaping requirement. We've actually asked for variance from that and the amenity requirement, but I understand that my client already meets the landscaping requirement with the exception of planting maybe 1 additional tree on the western boundary and removing an invasive Brazilian pepper. So we're okay with the staff's recommendation as to that. We do think that the amenity requirement is harsh because when you look at the overall situation there, this particular use does not contribute in any way to the traffic, pedestrian traffic on that sidewalk. It is completely superfluous. This is a beach parking lot where all of the traffic goes towards the beach. All of the other uses in that vicinity all have their own parking lots. So this is not being used for that. It's strictly a beach parking lot, and of course for the tenants on the property itself.
Mr. Driscoll, if you don't mind, which specific condition are you referring to by number? It'll just allow us to more easily identify it.
Well, if it'll help too, I've prepared an exhibit to address. Give me 1 second.
Certainly, sir.
I've prepared an exhibit. Is it okay if I hand these out to the commission?
Yes, please.
I've got several of them. I'll keep one.
If you'll leave a copy with the city clerk and then...
City attorney, do you want one too? Oops.
Thank you. I got it. Don't worry.
Pass it down for you.
So I prepared this to assist the commission in reviewing the conditions that we have some issues with, and I'll just jump right to that. I did want to introduce my clients. They're here as well. It's Chris Tacticos. This is truly a mom-and-pop organization, even though it's a HATAC LLC. It's these two folks right here. They're the owners and they're the operators. So going through, and I think you asked about the specific condition I was talking about, the variance is not included within these conditions, so that's why it's being, because it's a separate vote. I just wanted to make it clear that we are asking for a variance from the entire requirements of 39.10, and I'll explain more about that. But if the commission's approval of the variance is for the variance from subsection A, which is the 10-foot sidewalk, and the variance, and no variance other than not granting the variance on the amenity, we understand that, but I would submit to you that there really is no reason for that amenity because there is no use of that sidewalk occasioned by this property. And I have some photographs I'd like to show you as well. But just to go through these conditions that I handed out, just so you know what we're asking for. Now, this is based on a resolution that was provided to me last week. And so I don't know if the resolution has been amended because what was shown on the screen was a little bit different, just in the wording of some of them. So some of that may be ameliorated by some of the language that was on the screen. But in terms of the written resolution that we received, we have concerns, number one, over the parking spaces that are reserved for the residents and their guests. We, prior approval of this, and I'd like to put a copy of the prior conditional use in the record as well. I have a copy of that with me. The prior approval was for 21 through 24, 4 lots be dedicated to the residents. And so we're asking for that again. And as you pointed out, Mayor, in your questioning, it's 4 units or 3 units, 1 for each and an extra. And their history has been that each of those residents only has 1 car and that the 4 have been adequate. Obviously, they would still be able to use the other spaces, but we don't want to have to reserve them specifically for them and allow the public to use those as well. The prior conditional use, looking at number 3 there, the prior conditional use was for 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. I know staff is asking for sunrise to sunset. We would prefer the 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. That has been historically the time period there. This, as you've heard, this conditional use has been in operation since 2018, and there have been no issues with that time period. So we're asking for that. I didn't see this language in what Brandon presented, so I don't know if there's still a section in there that talks about unforeseeable overnight parking of vehicles, essentially. And we just want to make sure that the approval allows for the occasional situation where somebody maybe leaves their car overnight, they're out drinking at one of the bars or something, or there might be some reason that they may need to leave it overnight. So I just asked that we strike the language about overnight and just say except for unusual circumstances, the lot shall be closed to all resident vehicles after closing. On number 7, and again, I didn't see that up on what Brandon had on the screen. And he said his language was that there be a lot of tenant while it's open, and we're fine with that. We just want to make it clear that once the lot is full, sometimes Mr. Tacticos goes home, he's done, and then the people let themselves out and they exit the property on their own. He doesn't sit there and monitor parked cars all day. He takes off and leaves it there. And then number 11, this is a real sticking point for us, the 5-year limitation. We asked for a permanent conditional use so that they can continue to maintain this without having to seek approval every several years. And I know that the city attorney talked about section 4.9, but if you look at section 4.9, you have to recognize that it says the city commission may attach such conditions to a conditional use approval as are necessary to carry out the purposes of the comprehensive plan, any adopted special area plan, and these regulations, and to prevent or minimize adverse effects upon other property in the neighborhood. So in order for you to impose, and it does have the condition of duration of the permit, hours of operation, you would have to make some finding that there's a possible adverse effect, or it's inconsistent with the comprehensive plan, or some other type of finding that would support limiting the duration of the conditional use. And I would point out to you that there is nothing in the code that allows you to limit the duration of a variance. If a variance is justified, the variance should be granted. And I think that's really what staff is recommending, is that you limit the variance on this 10-foot sidewalk. And I think I can assuage your concerns about that, because this property is not going to be a parking lot forever. I mean, I think that's pretty clear. You asked about the possible development on this site. Somebody's going to develop this site. It probably is not going to be my clients, but they're not going to continue to operate this for a very long time. But they don't want to be tied to just 5 years and have to come back through this and do this exercise every 5 years. You're talking about a very small scale, 28-space parking lot. It is a very unobtrusive type of use. It is low intensity use, and they have had a history. As you've heard, there are no code violations that have ever been prosecuted to success. So they've had a history of operating as good operators. And I would submit to you that any emails that you've gotten where those people are not present should not be considered. It's not a popularity contest. You know your decision has to be based on the record and on the evidence. So you should disregard those comments from folks that are not here to testify and be cross-examined as to whatever their concerns are. And with respect to going through the remaining condition changes that I've requested, if you look at, and I didn't keep you a copy, but I know we have extra copies up there, I believe. So if you can get one of those, Madam Clerk, I'd appreciate it at the end. The condition on number 12 about retaining a possible easement, there's nothing in the code that requires that easement. There's no code provision that would give you the authority to do that. I would submit to you that it would be an exaction and a taking of my client's property to require them to provide that easement. Certainly if there becomes a circumstance where the DOT and the city has no control over that roadway. That's a state road. So if the DOT decides they want to expand it, or the city wants to expand it, you still have to get permission from the DOT to do that, including expanding the sidewalks. Those are all part of the DOT's property. So if that ever occurs, you can certainly reach out to the property owners and find out if they're willing to grant variance or easements, so if there's an expansion necessary. And at that time, if the city wanted to do that, you could do that. I don't think you need to make it a condition of this particular approval. And then on 13, you will see that the staff in this condition has built in an expiration if there are changes at the property. So that covers the city with respect to whatever might occur there. If there's redevelopment, this issue may come back up, and you may have to look at the expansion of the sidewalk at that point. But there's no reason to already decide that within 5 years we're going to have to do that. So we've asked to strike the 5-year provision. And then finally, Brandon talked to you about the permanent restroom, and he offered you the alternate condition. We're fine with the alternate condition. We certainly don't think that there's any justification legally for the city to impose upon these folks to build a restroom when there's no code provision that requires it. They are technically not even required to have the portalette. They do like to have the portable toilet, and they do maintain it well. They have a professional service that does that for them. So we're asking that they would be allowed to continue that. It does provide an amenity for the operators when they're there as well. From a conditional use standpoint, the law says that if a property owner comes before the city and presents facts that demonstrate that they're entitled to the conditional use, the burden then shifts to the city to prove why they're not entitled to it. So I think that based on the staff report and based on the information that I provided and will continue to provide you as I go through my comments, I think that they have already presented sufficient evidence to show that they are entitled to the conditional use. So if you were to deny it for any reason, you'd have to have legal reasons to do that. If you're imposing conditions, there has to be some evidence to support the imposition of those conditions as well. So I would caution you on some of the ones that I've specifically asked about and suggest to you that the more defensible position that the city would take would be to include the conditions as amended in the presentation that I've given you. I've kind of jumped around, so let me just make sure I don't miss anything. One of the justifications for the variance to the sidewalk requirement is that there is a retaining wall there. There just isn't enough space to get a 10-foot sidewalk in there. And so that would create an intense hardship on my clients. I have some photographs that I can hopefully put up on the overhead.
One more time. 90 degrees.
Look down here.
90 degrees the other way. There you go.
Yeah, this way. All right. That's a picture overall of the property. Some of these are very similar to what Brandon showed, but there's a couple I just want to make sure you've had an opportunity to look at. You can see it's fairly well maintained. It is an impervious parking lot. I do want to point out that the land use plan, Brandon didn't mention in his presentation, but the staff report shows that this particular proposal meets two primary conditions or policies of your land use plan. One of them is to have pervious surface parking areas within the city. So this is accomplished by this particular use. I know there's some issue about compaction. Sometimes that does occur. But as you add shell throughout the life cycle of a shell parking lot, you can improve that pervious nature. And secondly, is for there to be parking in the city. City is always looking for parking. That is one of your policies in your comprehensive plan. So that's why this particular application meets and helps to further the goals and policies of your land use plan. Here's some of the landscaping, and you can see that they have done a really nice job of taking care of the property. And there's wheel stops, car stops, bumper stops at every parking space.
Excuse me, is that current pictures, just so that I know? Is that what it looks like today?
Taken within the last, probably before the last, the hearing in January, so maybe within 90 days, something like that. And here's another view. This is with the residential property and the 4 residentially designated spaces. This is a view to the neighbor on the south. This shows the outdoor shower and the tenant parking signs that they've added. And this is a view towards Gulf Boulevard. I believe that's towards Gulf Boulevard. And again, another shot with the tenant signs. And then here is a view of some of the landscaping that they've added, and they intend to add more landscaping. They're trying to make the site as beautiful as they can. Here's a picture that shows the sidewalk in front, and as you can see, they have a retaining wall to the left of these plants. There's a hydrant there. There are other utilities there, so if the DOT even allowed any work in there, it would be quite extensive, and I think you can see that that creates a potential hardship on the property owner. And I want to show you just a couple more photos. This, and I apologize for the print quality on that. That's the view down the block towards the beach. You can see the beach access that's used by this property and the patrons that park there. This is the condominium that is to the west of it. And you can see the beach access from the other direction there. And then finally, the beach access that goes all the way out to the beach, and there's a big, wide, expansive beach out there. I did want to show you a couple of the nearby parking lots, so you can see that this parking lot is consistent with what's in the area. This is the Serrata parking lot across the street. It's quite substantially larger. This is a much less obtrusive parking lot that my clients have. And you can see that this is exactly the same construction with the mix of grass, sod, and shell. And here's another shot of it. And then another. You can see the amount of grass and how the cars are parked on grass, they're parked on shell, so you have that mix. My client has taken great steps to try to provide for a shell drive area, even though some of the cars will be parking on grass. And again, these are all, this parking lot's been operating for a long time without any runoff issues of any kind, even during some of the storms that we've had since 2018. And this just shows the sign showing that that is a Serrata parking lot. I do want to show you just a couple of pictures. This is a property that's further south on Gulf Boulevard. This is the 5000 Gulf hotel property there. You can see again the exact same construction of a parking lot, very similar to the one that my client has. You see they also have a retaining wall, and again they have the substandard sidewalk as well, and you can see that that's pretty pervasive in that area. Here's one final shot of that particular parking lot, and again you can see it's a mix of grass and some shell. And then finally I just wanted to run down a few photographs of the sidewalks up and down Gulf Boulevard, and you can see even there with the new Sunrunner spot, there's no widened sidewalk. You can see all the resorts all up and down. They all have the same existing type sidewalk that also borders my client's property. And I would submit to you that each of these uses has much more of an impact on that sidewalk than my client will, because people just don't go out to that sidewalk when they park in this small parking lot. And there's another one. I just got a couple more. Sorry to inundate you with these, but I do want to make sure that the record is complete with these types of exhibits. And you can see up and down Gulf Boulevard, there are a number of these, and they're all the same. The sidewalks are very similar, if not exactly the same, up and down Gulf Boulevard. So if you look at that and you compare it to what my client is doing, you can see that they're consistent with it. I do want to make sure that the record includes all of the items that we submitted, so I'm going to submit this to the city clerk as well. This is our applications, and I did want to make sure that we included in the record the prior conditional use, where the city commission at that time found that we met all the criteria for an approval. The conditions, some of the conditions were the same, some are different than what staff is asking for now. It was approved, and I'd like to enter that into the record as well. It was approved as a 9 to 9 operation, which was what we're asking for again. And if you look at the sidewalk standard that's set forth in section 39.10, it says a 10-foot sidewalk shall be constructed that will allow for safe, unobstructed, and efficient pedestrian flow, and the potential for sidewalk cafes and outdoor eating areas as appropriate. And you can see that when that was adopted, the idea was that if you redevelop one of these large resorts, you might want to have, or if you do some other type of commercial building type of construction, that you might want to have an outdoor cafe or something and use that sidewalk. So then you have a reason for the wider sidewalk. This is not the type of development I think that was envisioned when that happened. There may be a day when there is more intense development on this site. And at that time, as I've said, the city can come back and try to address that issue at that time. So with that, I would ask that if there are speakers, I'd be given an opportunity to rebut, but we believe that you should grant the conditional use. I don't believe that you should limit it to 5 years. It should be permanent. I think you should grant the variance as to the sidewalk requirement and the amenity requirement, and I'm ready to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Driscoll. Do we have any questions for Mr. Driscoll?
Mayor, I have a few questions.
Certainly.
Mr. Driscoll, whose photographs were those? Are those yours?
My client took those.
Your client took those photographs? Okay. Do you have any experts here that can substantiate, for example, the assertion that this use will have no impact on the sidewalk?
No.
No expert here?
No.
Okay. Do you have any experts here relating to parking spaces for residential use? In other words, how many parking spaces are required per dwelling unit?
No.
Okay. Do you have any experts here to opine on the need or the not need for landscaping?
No.
Okay. Do you have any experts here to opine on the use of shell and its compactness and water management?
No.
Okay. And do you have any experts here that can opine to using the 10-foot sidewalk as a outdoor cafe?
No.
So, in other words, you would agree that your job here as a lawyer is to make legal arguments only, and that you cannot offer competent, substantial evidence. Is that a true statement?
No. That is not.
It's not a true statement?
No, I can present competent, substantial evidence in my testimony and the exhibits that I provide. You don't have to be an expert to provide competent, substantial evidence. And all of those items that you pointed out, an expert testimony is not necessary in order to show the facts that this particular development does not impact the sidewalk, that there is no runoff. My testimony is sufficient to establish that there is no runoff from this site and that the compaction is not an issue in this particular site.
But you do understand that you are not an expert in these areas and you cannot offer expert testimony in those areas.
I do acknowledge that. Yes, you're correct, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Driscoll.
Anything else? Okay, thank you.
I do
No,
have
no.
a question.
Excuse me. I was just thanking you for answering the city attorney's
Okay, all
questions.
right, that's good.
The commission may have further questions, and so let's give somebody else an opportunity, and maybe they'll answer some of the questions. So why don't we start on this end and work our way down?
I don't have any questions for the applicant. I have a question perhaps for staff or the city attorney. Does the conditional use run with the property or with the owner?
So it runs with the property, but again, the code legislation which was adopted allows for you to establish time limits in order to address any noxious uses or incompatibilities.
So if it is granted, it could be sold as a parking lot down the road?
It could be sold as a parking lot, and it could perhaps, I'm not even sure, but it possibly could be split where someone could buy the residential part and then they would have a commercial parking lot next to that. It wouldn't be the same owner.
Okay. That's it.
Thank you. Go ahead.
That was one of the questions I had. How long has your client owned the property?
They bought it in 2005.
Okay. And I've noticed there's been a for sale by owner sign out there over the years. Is it currently for sale by owner?
I don't know the answer to that. Is it for sale right now, the property? Okay. Yeah, they would like to sell it to someone to develop it.
Okay.
They do not have any intention of selling it as a commercial parking lot. But obviously, as the city attorney said, if they did sell it, someone could continue to operate whatever conditional use is approved.
So what are they currently selling it as?
They're trying to sell it as a developable property, which is really its highest and best use. Clearly, this is not the highest and best use for this particular property. This generates very little income. This is a very low volume type of use. The most money they make is during the holiday season or 4th of July, those kinds of events. But otherwise, it's not some big revenue generator.
Further questions? Thank you.
A couple of questions, because you entered into the record, and I'm not sure if we have a copy of that, the prior conditional use application that was approved.
Right.
So, and I know you only referenced the 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. time, but you also mentioned several times that this is strictly used for the beachgoers, right? That's why no one's walking on the sidewalk and so forth. So our
Right.
beach is operable sunrise to sunset, so why wouldn't the parking lot be the same? You know, why 9 to 9? That I don't quite understand.
Well, that's like I said, that was the way it was approved before. It just gives them some more flexibility for people to get their cars. Sometimes people come in the summer, obviously, 9 o'clock is basically after sunset. Yes, other times of the year it might be dark, but it's to give them more time for people to get their cars out of there, that's all.
Okay, because, I mean, we do have sunsets sometimes close to 6 p.m., so I just wanted to put that out there because our beach is not open on those times. The other thing I saw, and some of those pictures I could tell were not recent. I mean, I saw 2 people walking on the sidewalk that were still wearing their COVID mask, and there's construction going on in that part of the street that's not currently happening, so I know that's not within those 90 days. But the fact that there is somebody walking there tells me that it is being used coming from the north to the south. So I don't see why we wouldn't, and maybe we can deliberate this later, but where you're getting that the 10-foot isn't needed. Some of the pictures you're bringing up are developments that are up and coming, one that was approved, that we are requesting 10-foot sidewalks. Not to mention that I participated in more than one, but even last week on what Pinellas Ford and FDOT are asking for, which is 10-foot sidewalks for safety with the initiative of Vision Zero. So I don't see why your stretch wouldn't be important. So I don't know if you know that, but that's currently what's happening. It's not something in the future, but it's something that's being discussed today.
Well, let's give them an opportunity to answer,
And if
please.
I could just respond to that. If there's a person in the picture that's coming across the sidewalk that's in front of my client's property, they're not coming from my client's property. They're just citizens walking by. If you're going to impose a restriction on a property owner, that property has to contribute to the reason for that. And this property is not contributing in any way to a 10-foot, the necessity of a 10-foot sidewalk, because people are not even going in that direction from this property. Those are people that are just walking by from other properties to other properties. They're not stopping at this property. That's just not happening. I'm not going to say it never happens, but that is not the common situation, and therefore to impose that type of a condition or require that type of a sidewalk construction would be an imposition and an exaction against this property that's not justified by the facts. It's just not there. And there's been no evidence presented to you that would indicate that this sidewalk is necessary to further this development. That section was adopted for when a resort is improved, and that is going to contribute to the traffic in front of that resort. That's what that was there for, and that's what that should be implemented for. I understand that the city has an overall goal of widening that sidewalk, but you have to tread very carefully in imposing that on the neighboring property owners.
Well, it is a conditional use, so that would be an amenity for the community. Another question on one of the pictures you had, or you emphasized that there was a shower. So this shower is available for people who are coming from the beach right off of a residential primary use?
Yes.
So people can come up to that residence at that distance who are using it as a commercial parking lot?
If they're a patron of the parking lot, that's there for their use as well.
So they have access then to, or proximity to, that other primary use?
Yes, which is also owned by the same owner, and so they can control the behavior of the people involved.
As long as the owner's still there and not gone home because the parking is full, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. Another question on the portable toilet. During storms, is that portable toilet removed?
I can't answer that. No, they keep it there. Is it anchored?
I don't know.
Okay.
I would have to check with
There's
And I guess
a
this is a-
service that maintains it, so I think they rely on them. Yeah.
Okay, but fences can go during a hurricane. So my question then next would be to the city as to whether portable toilets have to be, and I'm pretty sure they are, have to be removed towards storms, and is that included as part of this application?
I've got, oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well,
It's not specific, although if the commission were to recommend a portable toilet in lieu of the permanent, that would absolutely be something worth including, so.
Okay. So, Brendan, and just to make sure, because from what I've seen, whenever a resident, including myself, when I've had remodeled into my home, and especially that we've had many storms, we were required to move those portable toilets. So that's why I'm asking, is it required in this case as well?
It's not specified in the code, and typically portable toilets are allowed for special events under our land development code. They're not something that you would require for a use long-term, so that the regulations of them are fairly limited. They're there for special events primarily.
Okay.
But if you were to allow one on this site, you could impose other conditions that are appropriate for the welfare.
Because they're asking for permanent, so.
Correct. I did want to mention that the condition that staff drafted as a consideration in the staff report would have portable toilets that are made permanent are actually regulated by the Department of Health, so they would need to go through the permitting with them if they were to actually get a permanent portable toilet. So there might be other standards that they have to comply with. I believe they have a company that handles the portable toilet for them, so that might be something that they're more familiar with, but they may have other standards over and above even what is in our land development code for that toilet.
Okay, and just to clarify, so if this were to move as not a permanent restroom facility, but portable, is that requirement that you're just mentioning about going to health something that is to be done before the operation of it as a commercial parking lot?
It could be. The permanent toilet, what staff drafted that was in the resolution, not the alternative condition, was that they'd be provided 180 days. So that would allow for the portable toilet to remain for 6 months, and then they would need to have the permanent toilet constructed. If they're permitted to retain the portable toilet for the use of the property, there are other conditions that, or other elements of that you would definitely want to consider, and having them remove it during a hurricane is, a good one. Having them maintain it at the frequency they've been maintaining it. We have not received any complaints about any issues with the toilet in the several years that it's been there, but just ensuring that they keep it up to spec is important.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Driscoll, I think we may have a couple more questions for you. Commissioner?
Yeah, just one quick one, and it's really for the owners. You're probably going to have to ask them. So in your 3 residence or apartment units, whatever they are there, are those mainly single occupants? Are we talking couples, families?
I think they're all single occupants, right?
Single,
Yeah.
at the moment,
Yeah.
yes.
Like single bedroom type places?
One is a 2-bedroom, but it's a single young lady who uses 1 bedroom as an office, the other is a bedroom. Single lady.
May I interrupt for a moment?
Kathy, why don't you come?
Mr. Driscoll, the Fair Housing Act really shouldn't we be discussing the makeup of tenants?
Yeah, they're just individuals.
I'm only asking in relation to parking spaces.
Yeah.
We can talk numbers of individuals.
How many bedrooms?
Yeah,
We
numbers.
should be talking about,
So there's 3 bedrooms, sorry to interrupt you, Mayor. 3 bedrooms with 1 occupant in each, is that correct?
2, 3, 4. One is a studio, so really, yeah.
But that's a 1-bedroom?
Oh, yes.
Yes, so with 3 occupants, is that correct? 3 occupants, yes.
thank you.
That was only 2.
And right, yes, 1's vacant, that's all.
And these are long-term tenants, they're not short-term.
Right, they're leased tenants, yes.
Thank you.
1-year leases.
Any further questions for Mr. Driscoll before we allow him to depart? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mayor, could I make one comment, please?
Certainly, please.
I have an answer to the question about whether toilets have to be removed, and I thought there's a section in the Florida Building Code, Section 11136B, that all portable toilet facilities shall be removed or secured within a permanent structure in the event of a hurricane watch. That's under the Florida Building Code.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. City Clerk, do we have any audience comments?
We have Kim Peterson.
If you'll please state your name and address for the record.
My name's Kim Peterson. I live at 8201 33rd Avenue, St. Petersburg. I'm one of the owners of the Gulf Beach Resort at 140 51st Avenue West. I'm also the vice president of the board, and I'm with 2 other owners and past board members. Do you want their names?
I do not. You have your 3 minutes, sir. Please do not. You have your 3 minutes, and it's counting down, so.
All right. Our concern is the traffic that this is going to create for people coming and going on that street. There's issues with the beach traffic. Walking down the middle of the street has caused issues for our guests at the resort. There's 7 spots now along the street that are paid spots. If you're going to allow the parking lot, our recommendation would be that that somehow is partitioned off and those parking spots are removed, and that becomes a walkway for the people. Because there could be as many as 80 to 100 people a day coming up and down through there, depending on how many people are in a car. As it is now, a lot of people just want to walk down the middle of the street, and there's no control over that. Toilet problems, I'm glad that's being addressed, because we have had people come try to use toilets at our resort off of the beach, have used the bushes for their bathroom. It's not a little frustrating. But I think from a safety point of view, we need to really control what's going on that street. It's a short street. There's people going to Krabby Bill's, there's people going to our resort, and there's one private residence halfway down there also. So if you could do a barrier and a sidewalk somewhere where those parking spots are, we wouldn't have a problem with it. It is a plus to have beach parking. So we got, at least that way, if you move the cars out of the parking area, then there's at least a place for 2 cars to pass each other in the street without running into pedestrians. And that's our biggest concern.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
That's all I had.
Okay, thank you. With that, we will close unless there's any further questions for the applicant or for staff. Certainly.
Very brief. I just want to say that it sounds like what the gentleman was requesting is some kind of amenity change by the city, and so that wouldn't be part of our application. And we do not believe that we contribute significantly to the traffic that's in that area. So we don't think that any further conditions are warranted in that regard. That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Driscoll.
I do have a question on...
Excuse me, Mr. Driscoll?
Not for the city.
Okay.
Are those spaces that was mentioned from Mr. Peterson city spaces?
Yes.
Okay, so there's 8 metered spaces.
I'm not sure of the number, but they are metered spaces.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Oh, and another question, because I know it was into the record, was but I don't have it, so I'm not sure if it's on that one. The conditional use application prior, was that the one that was asked or was removed of putting that sidewalk on the north end? Was that part of that particular application, or was just a temporary application? Do any of you remember? Or maybe you do.
That had been a recommendation for the 2018 conditional use permit. It was not adopted, though. It was not included in the resolution.
It was a recommended condition.
It was a recommended, right.
Okay. Thank you.
Brandon, I've got a question for you before you sit down. Is it possible, or could it be possible, and what would the process be like to split that property and have the residential and then have the parking lot?
Because of the amount of the lot that would need to be retained for the residential, it would be at least half of the property. I guess it could possibly be done, but it would be very limited in how much of the lot would remain for the commercial portion of it. They have 3 units there currently, and they would be allowed 5 units based on the parcel size, so probably about half of the lot would need to be retained in the split for the, and there are other considerations, that setbacks and other things, lot coverage, so I don't know if it could viably be done, but they would severely limit the amount of lot that could be used for commercial parking if they split it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Brandon, before you go.
Go ahead.
I just want to make sure we're crystal clear on the sidewalk issue, all right? So at 5 years, I want to make sure I understand this. If FDOT says we want them to expand the sidewalk, then they have to, according to the condition?
The request would be, just like the former approval, there was a time limitation on it, and that was, in the former approval, the 2018 approval, it was for the conditional use permit, and they had also applied for the sidewalk. They did receive a variance for it then as well. So at the end of the 5 years, the conditional use permit would go away. That's based on what staff drafted. If they wanted to come back and request it again, they could choose to build the sidewalk, or they could choose to ask for another variance. But it wouldn't automatically trigger that requirement in 5 years. It would just be if they came back.
Got it, thank you.
Thank you, Brandon.
Before you sit down, what type of housing is that? Is it multifamily or?
It's considered multifamily at three units.
Okay, thank you.
I have one more question for you as well, Brandon. The variance, is the variance as the conditional use, does it go with the property? Or does it go with the use? Or does it go with the owner? In other words, if they sell the property in 4 years and the new owners want to redevelop it, does that sidewalk variance still in effect, or does that go away at some point if it changes hands or changes use?
It does, like the conditional use permit typically run with the land. I believe the applicant's agent mentioned that, there was a condition in there that if the use of the property were to change, or if there were to be a redevelopment even to the same use, there is a condition that the developer would be responsible for the 10-foot sidewalk. There is some administrative approval to reduce that, but they would be eligible or responsible for whatever that is at that point. I think staff's recommendation was for the 5-year limitation on this use, which would tie in the variance. But if they sold the property a year from now, and it were to be used under this cover by the new owner, whether it's 5 years or whether it's permanent until development, they would not be responsible for the sidewalk based on what's drafted. Really, all staff was recommending was a year limitation on it. It wouldn't affect anything to do with ownership, except if there were redevelopment of the use.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Any further questions for staff or the applicant? With that, we will close the quasi-judicial part of the hearing, and we will move on to deliberations. Comments?
The only comment I want to put out there is, it's in his rebuttal, counsel made an assertion that this generates no traffic or some assertion like that, and he's opined that he's not a traffic expert.
All right, no statesmen. Somebody would like to make a motion?
Are we not going to discuss this?
Well, I asked if you guys want to discuss it. Nobody said anything, so.
Well, I guess my question to the commission is, how would you like to go about it? Do you want to go through each condition? I see a lot of things I do want to discuss, because I do not want something that is permanent, because there's too many question marks for me on this. And the fact that someone can purchase this property and continue to use it even the way that it is indefinitely, and we don't know the owner of the future, doesn't settle very well with me.
Do you consider 5 years permanent?
No, they were saying that they wanted permanent.
Sure, but the staff's recommendation is 5 years, and we could easily adopt the staff's recommendation for the condition. Additionally, we could also, for example, modify it to say we can do a 5-year approval with the administrative approval at the end, as long as the applicant doesn't have any code violations, any other issues in the past, so that we could approve it going forward, as long as the applicant is in good standing, which is what we generally do for most applicants, as long as they're in good standing. And so far, the applicant has not demonstrated that they are not in bad standing, that they have any code violations, nothing ongoing. I agree, I don't think it should be permanent. At the same time, you have a stipulation that in the case of redevelopment, the conditional use will be voided anyway. And then they would be, subject to all the other conditions in the land development code and comprehensive plan.
I agree with some of your concerns, Commissioner Resnicki. Even if it's 5 years, what if the property sells in 6 months? Then we have 4.5 years with someone who has the use that we don't know. So that's one concern. But I guess the biggest concern is the two uses existing together. And what problems could come from that.
What problems have there been in the past?
That's what I'm having trouble with.
So they've been operating like this for 6 years. We haven't had any problems. So what problems do we anticipate?
We've all received some emails of some complaints, quite a number of complaints. So
Sure.
you assume maybe half are true, it's still a lot. So those are just my concerns. I mean, Commissioner Resnicki, you gave an example of the shower being attached to the building. I mean, it just seems a bit odd to me. It just doesn't seem like the uses necessarily go together. And then I have the concern of what it could open up for other people, what they might try to do with parking or to get multi-uses out of their property. There are other single-family homes on the street north of that that fall in the large resort district as well. So what would that open up for parking with them? Are they going to try to make inquiries to help generate revenue on their property? So those are just some thoughts I've had.
Absolutely. And, you helped me. I remember a lot of comments even public has made, or just overall when there's a parking lot coming up and the proximity that it is to whether it's a home or a park. It's hard when you're a renter and you're not an owner of where you live, right? You are coming in under a lease, and how can you complain that there is a shower? I don't know exactly where the shower is. I didn't even know that was there until you put up that picture. But it tells me that that's something that's not even a part of this application, but that the owner's okay with having it so close to maybe potential children who are inside that unit or apartment or bedroom or whatever it may be. So that does concern me, that's there. So the two, I have the similar concern that you have, Commissioner, is that having two primary uses without a clear separation, I don't think that's a good thing.
Where has it been a problem in the past for the last 6 years?
Well, other than all the tons of emails that I've been reading.
They were all from one individual.
Pardon?
They were all from one individual.
No, I had more than just one individual. And even if there's just one, again, I know the person's not here, but it's a complaint.
Sure.
So, and again, you're a tenant. So I know it's much more difficult for a tenant.
Why?
Because you're not the owner.
So what keeps you from complaining?
There could be hundreds of reasons, Mayor. You could be in a low income, I don't know what the rental is. I don't know the individual person's situation. They might need this home. They can't afford to look for another home.
And so what would prevent them from complaining and filing a code enforcement violation?
Losing their home.
How could they do that?
Losing their home.
How could they lose their home?
I don't know.
Can the applicant terminate a valid legal lease for any arbitrary reason?
I do not know that. I don't know what their lease looks like because I haven't seen a copy of their lease. So if maybe there was a copy of the lease, then I could tell you most definitely they cannot. But I don't have a copy of that lease. So I do not know that. That would be a good thing to have brought to this application so it wouldn't be a question. So I do not agree with that. So yes, I do see it as a problem. I do not think that having two primary uses without a clear separation should be allowed.
I think you're setting up a fallacy that doesn't exist.
Mayor, that was my point, that why planning staff actually took a lot of care to try to balance the uses, because it is they are tenants that are going to be dealing with a use that's considered intense, a commercial parking lot. That's not buffered, there's nothing blocking it, and if they were to complain, they're essentially complaining against their landlord, which, is a major reason why you wouldn't complain. So I think staff has done a good job at trying to evaluate and try to put together some conditions to try to make sure that those two uses, looking at them independently, residential use, commercial parking lot, and not thinking about like who owns them necessarily. But unfortunately, that was my thought too, is that I think that those tenants are kind of put in a spot that they can't really potentially use the resources that they have at the city because of potential fear of reprisal.
Are you saying somebody can't make a miscellaneous complaint?
You can't. It cannot be anonymous.
Except for ClickFix.
What?
Except for ClickFix, right? Yeah.
By law, your code enforcement stuff is all, you cannot be anonymous anymore.
I think that, I don't know that we as the city commission need to be in the business of mediating landlord-tenant disputes in any fashion. And I don't think it matters whether that's a 3-unit apartment building or a single-family home or any number of other uses that it could be. I think that, what we need to look at is, does this make sense to have as a parking lot? And if a tenant wants to, if they have an apartment available and a tenant goes and looks at it, and it's very clear that it's a commercial parking lot, and they choose to rent that spot, I'm not sure that it's any business of ours to, want to negotiate their lease for them. I think that falls into the category of maybe things that maybe we can try to regulate, but I don't see any purpose in it. So I think we should be looking at it as, does this make sense as a parking lot? And like the mayor said, they've been doing it for quite some time with minimal problems. From my perspective, I don't see any problems with this. My concerns are making sure that we don't, I would have a concern with making it perpetual, and not having there be an expiration date, because particularly with the 10-foot sidewalk, I agree. I don't think there's any reason to make them put in a 10-foot sidewalk for the use that they're doing. But I don't want to, make it impossible for us to make somebody who redevelops it into something else put in a 10-foot sidewalk. So, for me, if we do something that that has an expiration, whether it's 5 years or 7 years, or has the ability for an administrative renewal based on no problems, I think that seems very reasonable.
Mr. City Attorney, if the commission wanted to impose a condition that the conditional use application or the conditional use permit expires upon sale of the property, is that something that we could?
Upon sale of the property?
Or transfer of the property of ownership?
I mean, somebody might want to buy it with that use on it.
But they'd be able to reapply?
They could reapply.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so what I'm looking at, so with CUPs under 4.3, just so you guys can follow along with me, there is a provision, or 4.10, sorry, changes to previously approved conditional uses. So there's a distinction between minor revisions and not minor revisions. So there's a whole list of things that, in fact, 11 things where it says a minor revision is one which blank, 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 blank. And so and to me, changing the name of the person in which the CUP is in, basically the person responsible for it, it doesn't seem like it fits the criteria for a major revision. So, and when it's a minor revision, it does say the city manager is authorized to allow minor revisions to an approved conditional use after staff review to authorize the issuance of a development order for the construction in accordance with the revised conditional use. So things that would cause it to not be minor are things like alteration of location of any points of access to the site, does not change the conditional use, does not increase the density or intensity, does not have any change in external or internal traffic. I mean, so it's stuff like that that would trigger everything, because everything else would be a major change that would have to come back to you all. So I would think that you could go down a road of, as long as everything is the same and it's just changing, whether it's the name of the person owning the property and is responsible for all the conditions that are being imposed, because somebody has to be responsible. They have to take over this, and these conditional uses are recorded in the public record. You know, that could be done, I would think, as a minor revision, as well as perhaps even the duration of it. So to your point, Mayor, you were saying that, you know, as long as nothing has changed and they're in good standing, there hasn't been any complaints or any changes that would, you know, trigger something, that it could be done administratively. I don't know how the applicant feels about that, but it seems like it doesn't expose them to a public hearing like this.
No.
Well, they would seem to satisfy in spirit, their request.
Yeah.
While giving the commission the opportunity to review, if necessary, if there are significant issues that arise because conditions are not being followed or because of code violations or other issues. Commissioner?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of entrepreneurs, and I kind of feel like we're overthinking something that isn't a very large project here. And I agree with what Commissioner Marriott was saying. I mean, it's kind of like buyer beware, renter beware. I mean, I can't imagine being a renter and out walking that parking lot and going, oh, there's 20 or whatever amount of spaces we agreed to, without going, yeah, it's a commercial parking lot. And I agree also, Mayor, with, 6 years, the history has been pretty minor stuff. A lot of it's hearsay. So I don't like it making things so hard on people that are just trying to run a small business. So I personally don't see any problems with this one. Guess what? There's code compliances that have to be met, and if problems arise in the future, that's law enforcement or code enforcement's role. So other than one minor thing, we were talking about, I think it was 8 spots that have to be set aside, and I don't know if we wanted to get into this kind of minutia, but I'm thinking, 3 or 4 or 5 would probably be adequate for the residents without restricting the owner from making income off an additional 3 or 4 spots. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm inclined to agree. We have a resident of our city who's in good standing. They're a small business owner. They're going to live with the consequences of their actions while they're here, unlike many others who come before us who do not. I would recommend that we look at the 7 or 8 requests that the applicant's counsel has made that are before us, and look at those conditions and see if we are in agreement or if we would like to amend those. I think we should start with the first one. And I think that one speaks to the one you just mentioned, 8 spots versus 4 spots. Personally, I don't see any reason to set aside 8 spots for 3 units, which is significantly more than what would be customary for tenant spaces for parking.
I concur. I think 4 is fine. It gives 1 extra spot for a visitor.
I agree with the staff in keeping a separation from 2 primary uses on this particular lot, that those being written the way that the staff recommended should be kept that way, because it starts to separate the 2.
They're sharing an entrance in the parking lot. They're on the same property. Commissioners, your thoughts, 4 versus 8?
I go with staff's initial recommendation.
I'm fine with 4.
Okay, consensus is 4. Next, we have hours of operations from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Personally, I don't see why the applicant is asking for this. It would seem like it's actually limiting their hours during the summer, but that is your request. Personally, I don't have It might not be the way I ran it, but that's your request. So Commissioners, what are your thoughts on the 9 to 9 versus sunrise to sunset?
I guess, so my question is, if a vehicle is left there after the hours, then what? Then it's up to code enforcement?
It would be up to someone calling code enforcement.
Yeah.
Okay.
This would be a violation of CUP.
It would be a violation of CP, you're right, correct.
I think sunrise to sunset diapers the baby. I mean, if it's winter, cars shouldn't be there at 8 o'clock at night. If it's summer, they can stay till sunset.
I mean, personally, I would recommend sunrise to an hour after sunset, because especially in the summer, the sun takes forever to set. And if people don't leave immediately off the beach, I mean, there's no one chasing them down, right?
Yeah.
The beach manager's already gone home.
Exactly.
They're not out there getting people on their umbrellas and chairs and chasing them off.
I'm fine with that.
You're fine with?
Sunrise to 1 hour after sunset.
And I would like to keep it to sunrise to sunset. We do have a future beach ordinance coming up, which if I remember, and maybe Matthew, you could help me with this one, we went through this for a long, and maybe Commissioner Merritt, you remember as well, what sunrise to sunset is. As I remember, we discussed the same thing that the mayor just brought up, the sun going down on the horizon and what closes the beach. So I would like for it to stay consistent to what the hours is of the beach, if what they're saying is that this is what the parking lot is for beach use.
And you normally would give people an opportunity to pack their stuff up and leave. So even if we shut the beach down and there was somebody kicking everybody off the beach, by the time they pack up all their stuff, go to the car, pack everything up, that gives them a buffer of 60 minutes to get all their stuff in their car and go home without somebody having to harass them. We're here to make things, again, to Commissioner's point, why are we artificially making this more arduous on the applicant for no reason whatsoever? Commissioners?
Yeah, I'm fine with sunrise to an hour after sunset. That seems reasonable.
Commissioner?
Yeah, quite frankly, I'm not sure how this use aligns with the future of our city and making this the city better. But since we're moving forward on it, I'd say hour after sunset to allow people time.
Thank you. Seems we have consensus on sunrise to 1 hour after sunset. Does the applicant have any objection to that?
No objection. Thank
you, sir. Number 6, this is the overnight storage of vehicles not associated with the owner.
Yeah.
I think we should maintain the no vehicles after hours. I understand what your request is and why you're saying, and absolutely, I certainly, if I had a customer who was not in the condition that they should be driving, I wouldn't want to force them. But then the other part of me says that's what tow trucks are for. And I don't want to be that guy, but if you're an adult and you put yourself in that position, there will be consequences. And the applicant shouldn't feel bad about enforcing those.
I agree with that, Mayor. As is, not as amended.
Right, I agree, it shouldn't be striked.
Commissioners?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, we have consensus that the overnight, does the applicant have an objection with that?
No, we do not.
Thank you, sir. Looks like number 7 was resolved by number 3 and number 6. As far as vehicles after sunrise or sunset.
I think the question on number 7 is whether we require someone to be there all the time from 9 a.m. to an hour after sunset.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to have somebody in law enforcement with binoculars watching the whole time. I mean, I think we're getting stuck in the weeds.
Yeah.
So you want to remove the requirement for a lot attendant?
I think that, I understand what they're looking to do with allowing a lot attendant only when incoming vehicles are parking, and that when the lot is full, they would prefer to not sit there all day. yeah, I also know that somebody could walk back up and leave, and then the lot's not full anymore. But then if he's not sitting there, he can't collect any more money. So I feel like that should be up to him on that one. I don't know that there's anything going on in parking lots on the beach that really require somebody there supervising it on a regular basis to keep it safe.
Commissioners? We have,
I agree, it's kind of self-enforcing. There's an economic enticement there, so.
Yeah.
And it's such a small lot.
okay. Next, we have 11. The applicant has requested that we strike this conditional use. Sorry, the
time, the 5-year.
yeah, the conditional, that we strike the condition.
Don't strike.
Yeah, I don't agree it should be striked.
Yeah, I don't agree either.
Yeah, I would keep it
I think it
5 year.
should be 5 years
Yeah.
at a maximum, to the point of they live in the community. What if it sells in 6 months? We don't know who's coming in.
Okay.
If I may, Mayor, Matthew McConnell for the record. Just remember, this is the condition that staff modified in the beginning of the meeting. So there was language that it would expire in 5 years, but the applicant would have to reapply 180 days. So if we do leave that in, if we could just approve it with the amended that was shown, not the one in front of you.
Right.
Correct.
Real quick, Brandon, do you have I mean, I know that we're doing this on the fly, on that minor revisions versus major revisions, I mean, do you feel like just coming in and reapplying for the same exact thing, but extending the period out another whatever, would that constitute a minor revision? I mean, I'm reading all of the things that constitute a major,
I agree. I don't see anything here that would prevent an administrative extension unless it's, a material change to the condition. There is a later condition, and even goes above what staff had recommended in the past for violations can be brought back before the city commission. There are actual triggers in place for when they would be brought back, whether it's the current owner or future owner. So I would think that allowing for administrative approval would be all right under what's adopted in our code.
Mr. Driscoll, does that help you at all?
Yeah, I think that's a good compromise. If they can seek administrative approval within 180 days of the end of the 5 years, I think that's satisfactory.
Sure. So as long as it meets that 410A.
Yeah, so as long as there's no revisions to it and there's been no violations, there is language in one of the conditions that if there's code violations, it could come back before you and you could revoke it and that sort of thing as well. So I think the city's protected and it protects the applicant as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Are we in agreement with that? Okay. Thank you. Next, item 12, condition 12. The applicant has requested that we strike this condition. I do have a question on this one. Am I reading this correct, as it is proposed by city staff, that if DOT were to require 10-foot sidewalks, the applicant would be, is that what it means, that the applicant would be required to put one in?
Right. This would be if the city or the applicant move forward with a across-the-board
redevelopment.
We would ask that they would provide the easement for that. Again, this would be a requirement during redevelopment based on what would be included in the resolution under what the applicant provided. So I think our main concern is just making sure that should there be any kind of future redevelopment, that they still be responsible for the sidewalk, that it not be perpetual across any future use.
But as long as they maintain the current use, they would not be required to make changes to the sidewalk.
Correct, based on the previous condition just adopted.
Okay. If I may ask, it seems that our land development code, in talking in the large resort district, is very clear that when you do redevelop, you are required to put in 10-foot sidewalks. It seems that both your request to add it and the applicant's request to remove it are moot points, because the Land Development Code requires that it be done no matter what in the case of redevelopment.
The reason I added it in is because typically, and there are parts of our code where development is defined as actual, construction from the ground up, a new building, but development in the Land Development Code as it pertains to conditional use permits actually includes a conditional use permit. So just by asking for this, it triggers the need for them to include the sidewalk, which is why they asked for a variance. But in terms of any kind of, if they were to build a hotel or a new multifamily, there are other conditions that would still retain that sidewalk requirement in that case. So they would be waived under this development, which is just a sole conditional use permit, but in the future, they would still be responsible under actual new construction.
Okay, so if the applicant stated that they are not going to be seeking redevelopment at some point in the future, having this clause in there doesn't seem to in any way burden them. I mean, that's, my point is simply, if you don't have any intention of redevelopment, leaving the language in here as the staff requested doesn't really impact the applicant in any way, because they told us you're not looking to build a hotel or condos or anything else. And if you apply for another conditional use that is different from this conditional use application, you would be subject to the 10-foot sidewalks anyway.
Right, the applicant would not be required to do anything under this except for provide an easement. They would be required to provide the easement if this condition were left in. If it's struck, like the applicant mentioned, that there could be a negotiation with the property owners, but this is kind of was like a half measure for the requirement to expand the sidewalk. FDOT requires an easement. This would require an easement if the city or the FDOT were to move forward at any point in the future with the actual expansion of the sidewalk independent of the applicant. So that is one case in which this would actually result in an impact.
And this would be an easement on Gulf Boulevard, not on 51st, correct?
Correct, only on Gulf Boulevard.
Okay, because there was a discussion about an easement on 51st as well for a sidewalk, but that's been stricken.
That's not included, correct.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioners?
I think it makes sense to leave number 12 as suggested by staff.
Concur.
Me too.
I agree.
Okay.
Corrected 13.
I think 13 is a moot point now that we've denied 11.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
All right, lastly, toilets. Number 16. Thoughts, comments?
Brandon, do you have the amended language that you had about the permanent portable toilet?
Also, just to clarify, did I hear you correct in stating that a washroom, lavatory / washroom is not actually required? It's just that the applicant has put one there, and so since they've put one there in the past, it'd be nice to keep having one.
Correct. It's not an actual code requirement that they have one there. It's something we had asked for in the past.
And so if the applicant just removed it altogether, they would still be in compliance?
Correct, yes.
Okay. I think I would rather have something than nothing. I think building an entire bathroom seems rather excessive.
I agree.
I'm on, as long as, again, no one's documented that they've had any issues with not maintaining the portables in the last 6 years, I'm inclined to say keep using it as is. Commissioners?
Concur.
I would still want to find out about removable, I don't know how we could add it to make sure that the health department requirements are met if we keep a portable toilet. Because, I mean, we're saying this is 5 years, but this has been going on, I don't know when the first time was the portable toilets appeared, but obviously it's been more than 5 years already. So it's almost a permanent situation per se. How could that be added?
Well, if they wouldn't maintain it, they would be subject to a code violation, correct?
Correct.
And so if somebody were to report them, then they would be fined for having a portable toilet that's not maintained, that's out of code, that's in some way non-compliant. So that is your vehicle for enforcement. I'm not sure that we need to create a new one when there's already one in place.
And I think just direction from the commission towards staff, if you were to approve the portable toilet, we would know to reach out to the Department of Health. That's something we know that they need to do, so we can ensure that at the follow-up.
Yeah, and like for storm removal and things like that.
Correct, and that'll be part of the building code, so just like with the Department of Health, we would have to check that anyway.
Okay, those are all of the conditions that we have.
Can I ask another question? Those are the conditions that they brought to us, but there was conditions that the staff wrote as well. So the one on the permeable ground, because I know there was a question, and the engineer question about the calculations. How does that come about? Like, what are they going to be looking for, and what does that trigger? And I'm saying this just so that the owners know what it could possibly trigger if whatever these calculations we don't know about were to come up.
So typically, an increase in impermeability on the site of, I believe it's 10% if it's related to a parking area, that would trigger engineering calculations. So they have the surface as it's currently developed or laid out. If they were to shell to the perimeter of the parking spaces, that may trigger the need for them to provide stormwater calculations. There's only a limited amount of space that would need to be filled in, so I don't know that that would take place, but they do have other options. They could plant more sod where there's some dirt areas. They have other options that wouldn't trigger those. It's really up to them how they handle that.
Thank you, Brandon. Do we have any questions, comments on the other conditions imposed by or requested by staff, or are we okay with them as is? Okay, seems like there are no objections to the other conditions by the city staff.
I make a motion to approve with conditions Resolution 2023-24.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
City Clerk, if you'll please do a roll call.
Commissioner Phillips?
No.
Commissioner Resnicki?
No.
Commissioner Lorenzen?
Yes.
Commissioner Marriott?
Yes.
Mayor Petrilla?
Yes.
Motion carries 3-2.
Thank you.
Mayor, you have 2 variances that you have to tackle.
That's next.
Do we have a motion for variance? Actually, I only have one on my...
I've got it. I make a motion to approve variance 23068 for the sidewalk.
Second.
Did I get that correct?
City Clerk, if you'll please do a roll call.
Vice Mayor Lorenzen?
Yes.
Commissioner Marriott?
Yes.
Commissioner Phillips?
No.
Commissioner Resnicki?
No.
Mayor Petrilla?
Yes.
Motion carries 3-2.
So the next variance has to do with landscaping, I believe. Correct, Brandon?
Yeah.
If I may, we only have one variance on the agenda.
I believe we added a second. We split those into, and the second one would be approve or deny a variance for buffering pedestrian front. That's what I heard.
That's what he presented.
Right, I believe it was written as the one motion, but it's for the Part B, the 39.10B for the pedestrian improvements in the front.
Okay, well, one additional vote isn't going to hurt us, so.
More is better than less.
That's right.
So I make a motion to approve variance 23068B for the buffering and pedestrian front.
Do we have a second?
Second.
City Clerk, if you'll please do a roll call.
Commissioner Resnicki?
No.
Vice Mayor Lorenzen?
Yes.
Commissioner Marriott?
Yes.
Commissioner Phillips?
No.
Mayor Petrilla?
Yes.
Motion carries 3-2.
Thank you. That concludes item 6A. Next, we move on to item 7A, items for discussion. Commissioner Resnicki, discussion regarding Form 6 lawsuit.
I wanted to have this opportunity to talk with you all about it since, obviously we can't talk about it in any other way. I read the information on Form 6 lawsuit. I don't know if any of you have had a chance or opportunity to look at it. But with the amount of things going on in the city lately, and all that we're all going through as a city itself, I thought I would be interested to hear from, and I'll say our attorney, but also the attorney that is leading this, maybe have some way of them presenting to us as to what that could mean, because this is a potential problem, I would say, for our municipality in future, people wanting to step up to take, our seats or even committee seats. I just wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
If I can just expand on that, you may recall maybe a month ago or so, I circulated to you all a resolution that was prepared by the law firm of Weiss Sirota, and they were essentially looking for, they understood, just like our firm and lots of other firms, everybody was starting to tabulate the number of resignations that took place across the state, and this law firm represents a number of cities that also had been impacted by resignations, and they essentially decided that they wanted to bring a lawsuit in state court and federal court, and they were basically looking for plaintiffs, cities, and I think they were doing it on a flat fee of $10,000, and I had circulated that to you all. But of course, we were dealing with a lot of other things. I've kept up with it, and I've recently got some more information where they have filed the lawsuit. They originally filed the lawsuit, and it was 26 cities. Now it's gone up to 40 municipalities that have signed on to this lawsuit, essentially attacking. I really want to go into the details of the merits of the case, because I think the attorney who's doing this should be the one giving you that information, but essentially attacking the state for the impact on these local governments, and most of them are small governments that don't have a lot of folks that would be inclined to run for office or things like that. There are some municipalities that had 100% resignation. There's also tangentially another movement called Fix Form 6, which is more of a public relations approach to it. But so this is a reputable law firm, Weiss Sirota, and they have filed these lawsuits on behalf of 40 local governments, and I think it Matthew, what was it, over 100 elected officials, 150 elected officials that were affected. And I reached out to this attorney, and they said yes, they are still willing to take on other municipalities. If other municipalities wanted to join in, they would do that. So they've basically they've amended their lawsuits to add the new names, and I guess he would continue to do that. But I would be happy to invite the attorney to participate via Zoom. Probably be the best way instead of dragging them all the way here. If you wanted to hear more about it, if you didn't, that's fine. But I just wanted to make sure you know that this is happening and going on.
Thank you.
So I got a question. So is the only benefit of participating is it's just another city adding strength? Is there a benefit directly to any cities that participate?
I don't think that it's going to change what has happened already in the past, but I think that the benefit, if you saw it that way, would this city benefit by maybe the law being changed? I don't know enough about the lawsuit, but I don't know if they're trying to avoid the law or change the law. But, there are people that are trying to argue that perhaps they should have established, population limits on the application of this law, which is not uncommon. There are laws that are established by population. But the benefit to me would be that if you saw this as a problem going forward with trying to get people to run for elected office because they don't want to have this expanded disclosure of their assets. That's essentially it.
Were you asking, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, in other words, if we don't join that as one of the 40 or 46, and let's say the state said we agree, but only to those 40 or 46, or are they more likely to change the law for the entire state?
I think they're seeking to change the entire law, so it would be they'd have to change the law or have the law voided or deemed unconstitutional or something like that. I can't cite all the verse and line on the merits of the case, but if you stayed out of it and they prevailed, you would benefit from that. But I think the way that they see it is that the more that the justices see how much of an impact this occurred throughout Florida, so if it were 5 cities or 1 city versus right now a significant number, I think in their view it helps.
And you said there was a fee attached to joining the movement?
Yeah, originally, I don't know if it's the same, but originally they were seeking a flat $10,000 just to participate. So I don't know if that's still the amount, but that's what they were looking for at that time, was just a flat $10,000 to participate in this lawsuit.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Would anybody like to hear from an attorney it doesn't hurt to listen, at least in my opinion, it doesn't hurt to listen, because I don't know all the merits of this. I do think it's affecting the city. At least myself personally, even when I'm trying to see if I'm going to bring someone new into a committee, that's a question that everyone keeps asking, and I'm able to answer that part for the, if it's the Beach Stewardship Committee or the library or so forth, but it's in many people's minds. I don't know what our special election coming up is going to bring, but are we limiting the amount of people who would be interested in running in our city or participating in our city because of this? So I'd sort of like to know if anybody's interested in listening, or we'd rather just sit behind and just see what happens.
I might be interested, but just for economy, since our meetings are getting, sometimes long, and I think we got some big ones coming up, maybe we could get some kind of summary of it at a date in the future and email it to us or provide it to us.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I can do that.
Yeah, we can limit his time or a presentation. Yeah.
We had over 20 people volunteer to be nominated for the vacancies. It doesn't seem like that was really an issue. That's my simple doing the math,
Yeah.
That's it.
We had 80% of our commission resign because of it, so, I think we were affected. I think in talking to people in the community, I do think more people would step up if it wasn't mandatory, but I guess, Commissioner Reznicki, to your point, what would the format be? Would we do it before a commission meeting? Would it be part of a commission meeting? That's my question.
Yeah.
A presentation.
Presentation, yeah, the format for the presentation.
Yeah, we can have the TV here, and it can be an action item, and the attorney can take 5 minutes and express to you what, more clearly what the merits are of the case, answer any questions about potential liability, any of that stuff before you decide.
Yeah, I think if it could be solved with maybe just more information via email.
Okay.
I'd be a fan of the email too, because I know it's going to be an issue for District 4, but I don't know if it's going to be resolved before August. So.
also further, the Florida League of Cities does a pretty good job sending out summaries of all this. I'm just saying there are resources available that if we need more immediate information before the next commission meeting or before the next report, those resources are available, and generally they're in your inbox.
Do you know if the Florida League is presenting on this already?
They were very vocal in the beginning. I have not really followed this case. Personally, I disagree with it. I think you took an oath not 2 hours ago that says you will uphold the laws of the state of Florida, and I've said this on December 27th the same way. Your responsibility is to uphold those laws. If you do not like the law, then you do the things necessary to change the law. Get a referendum, get it in front of your state representative who lives just down the street, get the grassroots moving, make the changes. I do not agree with the law as it was changed. I'm happy to tell you that. I don't think exclusion should have been made. But now that the law was passed, just like all other Florida laws, it is our responsibility as commissioners to uphold those laws. So if you don't like them, change them, by all means. I don't think it was a good law in the first place. But I don't think we need to get ourselves involved in another lawsuit at this point.
Well, I think we're just asking for a presentation at this point, not that we're participating, or via email if...
I think it sounds like at least two are requesting just a summary email sent to the commission on this so that you can...
That would be great.
That'll work.
Decide later.
Excellent. Next, we have item 9, staff reports. City Clerk, if you'll please start.
I have none, thank you.
Thank you so much, City Manager.
For sure.
Oh, man.
Thank you, sir. City Attorney?
Yes, I do have one thing that I want to do. Again, at the last meeting, I talked to you about having an executive session in 2 weeks, which would be April 9th for the lawsuit of the Red, White, and Booze lawsuit. But I want to be more clear about it, just in case there's somebody, wanting to make sure that I checked all the boxes, because I'm required under Florida statute 286.011 subparagraph 8 to request one of the exceptions for me to have a meeting outside of the sunshine, referred to as an executive session, is that the entity's attorney shall advise the entity, you are the entity, at a public meeting that he or she desires advice concerning the litigation. I am advising you I need advice. The subject matter of the meeting shall be confined to settlement negotiations or strategy sessions related to litigation expenditures. So this is going to be regarding settlement negotiations. There's 2 prongs, that we can only talk about 2 types of things. So it'll be limited to settlement negotiations or perhaps strategy session related to litigation expenditures. The entire session will, of course, be recorded by a certified court reporter. They will record the times and commencements and termination of the session, all discussion and proceedings, the names of all persons present at the time, and the names of all persons speaking. No portion of the session shall be off the record. The court reporter's notes shall be fully transcribed and filed with the clerk within a reasonable time after the meeting. The entity shall give reasonable public notice, and we will be putting that out tomorrow. Reasonable public notice of the time, date of the attorney-client session, and the names of the persons who will be attending the session. So as far as the people attending the session, I will tell you right now, it will be you all, hopefully, Mr. Saunders, myself, Matthew McConnell, Assistant City Attorney, perhaps Odie Dickman, Esquire of our law firm, William Boltrek, who is defense counsel for us, Brendan Sherman, who is also defense counsel for us, and an official court reporter. So those are the folks that will attend. Some of them may attend via Zoom, if you don't mind, so that we don't have to bring them from Fort Myers. And with that, at the conclusion of the attorney-client session, the meeting shall be reopened, and the person chairing the meeting shall announce the termination of the session. The transcript shall be made part of the public record upon conclusion of the litigation, which means that the public will have the opportunity to read what was talked about during that session after the conclusion of the litigation. So I wanted to make sure that I did that as formal as possible to make sure that get it right. So there you go.
What time?
What time? So that's going to be April 9th at 5 o'clock. I think we just needed 1 hour for that. So the 9th at 5. Thank you for your indulgence of that.
Can you please update us and elaborate on the Serrata's attorney? There seems to be things I hear on the community that somehow the city was somehow approved this. As far as I know, nobody approached me asking. I'm not sure about the rest of the commissioners, and so I think we should make sure that the residents are clear as to what's happening and why it's happening, and whether it's with or without the city's approval.
On what approval?
The Serrata's attorney joining the city, the lawsuit that the city.
So the Serrata intervened in the case that's being brought by Protect St. Pete Beach and individuals. The city took no position on it, one way or the other. So typically, judges will, allow people who have a vested interest that they see as a vested interest to intervene. There was no reason to really get into that fight and spend a lot of attorney time on it.
I just wanted to clarify that it.
Just to clarify further, Defense Counsel for Protect St. Pete Beach did consent to the intervention. So,
Yeah, I'm responding to the things I've heard from the community, that somehow that the city was approached, that we were asked, and that we somehow consented in one way or another. And
we were told, you're required to ask all the parties, and I spoke with Defense Counsel, and I said, is there any problem with us just taking no position whatsoever? And he said no.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that.
Sure.
District 4?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So I did ask the city manager to add beach renourishment progress, where we are, to that 9 April, because I got a lot of residents asking about that as hurricane season gets closer and closer. So I appreciate that. Congrats to Commissioners Marriott and Resnicki on your appointment. Kudos to Jen McMahon for the 9th Avenue, she's still here, good. The 9th Avenue parking workout with the businesses down there. I know it's been a mess since the seawall construction's been going on, and I appreciate you getting those garbage cans out to the rest of the beach. And I was going to give Mike Clark a compliment, since we always beat him up, but he's not here, so I'll send that in person to him. And the dog park is reopened again with grass. Thank you.
Thank you. District 3?
Just to, for everyone to enjoy the next weekend. I know I'm one that loves to participate in the egg hunt at the pool and always take home a tree. So I'm growing a lot of Australian pines at my home. So just for those of you out there in the community, it is a real nice event that they hold, and be there early, look for parking. Lots of kids do show up, and I think the city does a real good job, with that event. So happy holidays.
Thank you. District 2?
Yes, there's the Three Palms Point Neighborhood Block Party is Saturday, April 6th. It is from 6 to 9 p.m. That's the only update I have.
Thank you. District 1?
Just that with it being in the thick of spring break, I was out at Upham Beach this weekend, and it was a lot of people there, and everybody seemed to be having a really nice, happy, family kind of good time. And it seems like it's been a very reasonable spring break season this year, and so I'm stoked to see that, and stoked to see our businesses doing well, and we'll carry on.
Thank you so much. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.